It is Mailbag Day. Remember, if you guys want to drop mailbag questions for the show, in the YouTube comments, put mailbag, write your question, and we'll get to it on Fridays throughout the rest of the season. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook where we're releasing content throughout the season. Make sure you guys follow us there. And like I mentioned off the top, last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments. Every few weeks, I feel like I have to say this, and part of it is just because we still, thanks to the YouTube algorithm, get exposed to a lot of new people that haven't seen the show. I'm a Lakers fan. More accurately, a LeBron James fan that roots for the Lakers. And when LeBron retires, I won't have any of that nostalgic, emotional fanhood from my childhood, which will be probably better for my job. But I am a Lakers fan. And so I watch almost every Lakers game. And of course, I'm going to talk about it on my show. Why wouldn't I? I have opinions. They're my favorite team, right? And so some of that is going to come through in the show. That said, I work extremely hard to cover the rest of the league. This week, after this show, we'll have like over 3 hours of non-Lakers content that will be released in this week. I spend a great deal of time covering the rest of the teams. And so what we do to try to make that easier for you guys is we put chapters and we do breakout clips. So it's pretty clear to see where what we're going to be covering on any given show. And so if you don't want to watch any Lakers content, don't watch any Lakers content. I totally get that. I sympathize with it. I understand. I get that there's a lot of people out there that hate the Lakers for the obvious reasons involving the Laker franchise, and you may not want to hear me talk about them. I don't blame you. Skip over it. But there's a lot of good stuff covering the rest of the league beyond that if you just look at our channel. And so just that's just a little disclaimer for our new listeners that have joined the show within the last couple of weeks, couple of months. Yes, we're going to talk about the Lakers. They're my favorite team, but that's really, in the big picture, doesn't come close to encapsulating what we do on this show. Fantasy mailbag question. If you're the Warriors, are you doing a similar deal for Beal? Maybe in that scenario, you keep Kuminga and add Kyle Anderson, talking about Bradley Beal instead of trading for Kevin Durant. I would not make a deal for Bradley Beal. I don't think the Warriors really have a need in guard depth. I think that they've got a lot of guards that can do different things, and they've got a skill guard already. Bradley Beal is an excellent athlete who should, in theory, be a guy that can help in a lot of ways, but he's just such a bad off-ball defender and just in general off-ball role player that I on the defensive end of the floor that I don't think it actually solves many problems for Golden State. I think for them, especially at that salary point, I think for them, if they were going to make a big swing for a high-powered player, it'd be in the front court. Jason, Nets fan here, stating the obvious. The Nets are rebuilding. They are set to have the most cap room in the NBA next season, and they're tanking to get a high pick. Clearly, they want to get a star or two in free agency or a trade. In order to have a bottom 3 record and likely a top 3 pick, they're going to have to start losing even more. If the Nets offload Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton, they won't have any good role players on the roster. Won't that lack of decent starters make it harder to recruit free agents and or entice a star to demand a trade to the Nets? I think the Nets should hang on to Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton in order to be an attractive destination, and hopefully they get lucky in the lottery and snag a top 4 or 5 pick. What do you think is the best course forward for the Nets? So I think the idea of building through free agency doesn't make a lot of sense, certainly not in this coming summer. One, it just hasn't been the way that people have done it as of late. Stars have renewed deals on their current teams and then asked for trades. That's how player movement has happened for the most part. Also, if you look at free agency this year, there's just not a lot in the way of great options. Like LeBron could be a free agent. He's not going to Brooklyn. I think Jimmy Butler might go if you offer him a max contract, just if no one else does. If he just opts out and Brooklyn offers him a max, I think Jimmy would probably go just because I think he's going to have a hard time getting a max contract elsewhere. But I don't know how that makes any sense for Brooklyn. Like, why would Brooklyn do that? Well, Jimmy Butler is going to put you in the same position Miami's in, if that makes sense. So, I think the Clippers will probably try to re-sign James Harden. Especially since they still have Kawhi Leonard under contract. I don't see any point in going after a guy like a Fred VanVleet. Maybe Brandon Ingram. He's a guy that, if you're going to throw a big max offer because you wanted to, Brandon's the kind of guy that I would go after. He's only 27 years old, and Brandon is actually at his best when he's not on a team with a ton of ball handling, but on a team where he kind of gets to run the show. I think he's better in more of a heliocentric role than in like a read and react type of role. I think he's one of the better among the forwards in the league. I think he's one of the better kind of like pick and roll passers that we have. Very good at throwing skip passes and getting the defense into rotation. So Brandon Ingram's an interesting option. But then again, I mean, if Brandon Ingram's your best player, I don't think you're necessarily going anywhere special at that point either. So like, I think I'd use the cap space to try to win bidding wars for proven role players, especially ones that are due big raises, because those are the kinds of guys that you can turn around and trade for more asset return. Most of the guys that you sign, you can turn around and trade by like December 15th or January 15th in the middle of the season. I think it's December 15th if I remember the date. But like it's one of those things where like for instance, like remember when Indiana signed Bruce Brown? You know, like you end up getting a guy like that. Now they intended him to more be a role player on that team, and they ended up using him as salary ballast to go get a Pascal Siakam. But it's very possible that somebody turns around and trades a first round pick for Bruce Brown this year, even though he makes 20 something million. Nobody wants to pay Bruce Brown 27 million or 20 something million to be a role player on their team. But like if you have other bad contracts that are not contributing to your team, you will happily take a higher paid role player that'll help you. And you can get multiple second round picks, protected first round picks, things like that. So like you could try to get into the free agent conversation with specific guys to try to drive like just basically bringing in assets that you can turn around and flip. But I mean, it's self-awareness is a big deal in these sorts of situations. And to me, like it's pretty obvious that the Nets are years and years away from serious contention. So at this point, I'd actually go the Oklahoma City route, which is take on as much young talent as possible, getting as many cracks at the first round as you can get. Look for in the trade market lottery picks that failed for other teams, guys that are in their third, fourth year that didn't pan out, but it might have something to do with situation or role that might have a better chance. Like, those are the kinds of like if I think they should be calling Golden State and trying to get a Jonathan Kuminga. Like, I think it would make more sense for a team like Brooklyn to get a guy like Jonathan Kuminga and like really just give him the keys to the offense and just see what he's capable of, than go after a guy like Brandon Ingram, who we know exactly what he's capable of and exactly where the ceiling is there, right? Like there's just, at this point, if you're going to be bad with a purpose. Don't be bad without a purpose. But like as long as you have as many first round picks as possible and you're bringing in those younger cast-offs from elsewhere in the league, you just get a bunch of opportunities to evaluate young talent. And then once you hit on one or two of those guys, then you have a good idea. Like, okay, this guy can be the best player on a championship team, or like this guy can be the second best player on a championship team. So now we need the best guy, or like whatever it is. You get like a couple of guys that are like rock solid guys that you get out of your draft and development system. Then from there, you take a strategy approach to what are our strengths and weaknesses. Okay, well, with this group, we really need to anchor him with this sort of thing. Oh, like this guy's really going to need a 5 that can shoot. Oh no, this guy's going to really need this. This guy's going to really need a ball handler that can free him up and make him more of like a screening threat, whatever it might be, right? There's all of these different directions you can go with team building, but you can't really make that decision until you know what your foundation is. And if you make your foundation Brandon Ingram, you'll know what your foundation is, but you won't have any real upside there. The better option there is to look for younger talent. Once you identify what they are capable of, then you can build around their strengths and weaknesses. Last thing I'll say on that front is just you got to establish basketball culture. It's just so important. You need to, from the ground up in your franchise, from the coaching staff to the development staff, even the front office with the types of guys that they go after. You need to establish a basketball culture that permeates from year to year so that as you're building in that direction, you don't become a bad team, right? Like it's okay to be a bad team in terms of like your talent level and your ability to win games. You don't want to be a bad team in terms of the style of basketball you're playing. You want to play solid basketball on both ends of the floor so that as the talent grows, the ecosystem is already there for the talent to thrive in. From the football playoffs to college and pro basketball to the rush of hockey, what a time to be a sports fan. It's all happening, and you can get in on all the action of all the sports you love at DraftKings Sportsbook. With so many sports, every day is game day at DraftKings. That means unlimited opportunities to place your first bet, and DraftKings makes it easy. How easy? Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and pick your team and place your bet. One of my favorite bets to look at right now is the NBA championship picture. I have 3 teams in the same tier. I have Boston, Oklahoma City, and Cleveland all in the same tier. But Boston's at plus 250. The Thunder at plus 265. The Cavs are at plus 1100. So some nice value there. To help get you started, here's something special for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's code HOOPS, that's HOOPS, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. DraftKings, the crown is yours. How come teams in the NBA overlook G League players and even overseas European players? Example, Jay Huff was in the G League for years, never got an opportunity, but now he's a decent backup center. So why don't teams look outside current rosters for backup bigs? Exclaimer or disclaimer, I know that they will have certain flaws and they are backups for a reason. First of all, the good teams do. Memphis has been finding this kind of guy just about every year. Golden State just done it again with this Guy Santos, who's been doing some really useful stuff for them. Bigs, I think, in particular, translate better. Bigger forwards, bigger athletes translate better because simple athleticism-focused jobs, you can find a lot of young, useful talent around the world. But some of your perimeter, especially shot creation talent, they rely so much on skill and decision-making, and there's like a huge drop-off from the NBA level to sub-NBA levels in that regard. And so again, teams do. Some teams are better at it than others, but I think there's certain types of players where that's an advantageous way to look, and there are other types of players where it's not. Can you break down how Amen Thompson, a non-shooter, starting for Jabari Smith, has not negatively impacted the Rockets' offense with his cutting and his fast break ability? I would also say his offensive rebounding ability. The inability to convert spot-up possessions is an issue for Amen, right? He gets 0.74 points per spot-up. That's in the 11th percentile. But he actually logs more cuts than he does spot-ups. Houston does a good job of not putting him in that position very often. Most players like Amen Thompson that are bad shooters still log a lot of spot-up possessions. The reason why is they just somehow end up with the ball because people aren't guarding him, right? That's usually how it ends up going. But he logs more cuts than spot-ups because of the way that the offense is organized. Look at the end of the Memphis game, for instance. It was steady diet of Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, high ball screens, that sort of thing. High ball screens, high ISOs. They put Jaren Jackson on him for a good chunk of that, and they put Brandon Clark on him for a good chunk of that. But where is he always sitting? He's just sitting in the dunker spot on the left side of the paint, where if the guy steps up, he can get in there and get a quick drop-off pass or a lob and dunk it. Or if someone shoots something, he can crash the offensive glass. He can just do damage there. And that's really the thing. If you miss a spot-up 3, of course it hurts your team. That's an opportunity that you couldn't convert. But you can make up for it by overwhelming impact as an athlete. Running in transition, where Amen Thompson is amazing. Crashing the glass. Cutting to the rim, like we talked about. Defending on the perimeter. He had a huge stop against John Morant at the end of that game. You can turn yourself into a net positive while being a bad shooter. This is, again, it's all about organization and being the right type of high motor athlete that can really make teams pay for leaving him. I think part of it too, as far as the swap for Jabari Smith, has been that Jabari Smith has been a below average spot-up player this year himself. He shoots 40% on unguarded catch and shoot threes, so he'll knock down the wide open ones, but he misses quite a bit when he gets closed out at, and then he'll drive into long twos. He's taken 43 mid-range jump shots this year, only made 16 of them, only gotten 32 points. 32 points on 43 shots is not good. That undercuts his success. So again, the reality is it's not that much of a drop-off in spot-up capability. And there's just so few of those opportunities because of the way that they use Amen. Amen was so good at the end of that second Rockets win against Memphis. They were down 8 in the middle of the fourth quarter, and he had 3 dunks out of the dunker spot, including a pretty nasty alley-oop off of a play where Jaren Jackson overhelped on Şengün. His vertical spacing is legit. He's an easy target, and he'll pop up off the ground quickly. Again, to finish in the dunker spot, you have to be able to quickly come off of 2 feet around the basket. Lakers fans, you'll notice this with Max Christie as of late, who does it more cutting to the rim off of inverted ball screens with LeBron. But if you're going to finish among the trees, you got to use speed off the ground, quickly popping off the ground off of 2 feet and finishing. And Amen Thompson is really, really good at that. He blocked Jalen Wells at the rim in a help side possession. He spooked Jalen Wells on a closeout that forced him into an air ball on a catch and shoot possession down the stretch. He got the stop of the game on a hard John Morant drive where he stripped him down low and forced him out of bounds. He had 2 free throws after getting fouled out of another catch in the dunker spot. And then he got the biggest rebound of the game after Ja missed 2 free throws. He came flying in from above the break and grabbed the rebound. So like, just did so much good and never ended up in a position where it was a problem that he was being helped off of. The Grizzlies put centers on him and helped off him all game, and Amen just made him pay for it. And that's really all that you have to do to be a useful role player in this league. I also want to shout out Jalen Green. The Rockets have been playing really, really well. They're on a 5-game winning streak. And in this 5-game winning streak, Jalen Green has been averaging 33 points per game on 55% from the field, 53% from 3, and 96% from the line. That's just outrageous. I've talked a lot about how this team is so good defensively, and they compete so hard, and they're so good in transition that like if they just get good shot creation from Jalen and Fred, they win. Like I've pulled the stats in the past. I don't have them in front of me, but there's like a pretty clear through line for the Rockets between their shot creation from Jalen and Fred and whether or not they win games. One last thing I'll say about Jalen Green too. Like I talked about this a long time ago with respect. It was about a month and a half ago with respect to Jalen and to Jonathan Kuminga, which is like guys that their respective fan bases have been pretty low on. There's a chunk of Warriors fans that think Jonathan Kuminga is like the second coming of like LeBron James. But a lot of Warriors fans, most of the Warriors fans that I talk to are kind of like, they think he's fine. They think he's fine. They don't think he's anything special. Rockets fans have been mostly out on Jalen Green over the last couple of years. And I can't quit on guys like him and Jonathan, because that freaky, rangy athleticism with size, not like a small guard. Like Jalen Green's big. He's a decent size two guard. And when you have the ability to cover ground and to beat people off the dribble and to do athletic things when games become super physical and become more about leveraging athleticism, I'm always going to be high on that type of guy. And like, I understand Jalen Green comes with a lot of poor decision-making, inconsistent defensive effort and execution. There's stuff with Jalen that undercuts his success, but the talent is undeniable. And like going on a 5-0 streak, averaging 33 points per game on the level of efficiency. Again, that's 55, 53, 96. That's outrageous. That's just a really exciting stretch of basketball from Jalen Green. Hey, Jason, I absolutely love your show, and the way you break down the game has helped me understand so much more about it since I've been listening in this past year. My question for you is, when you say reeling about the Spurs, I've always thought reeling was a term used as a good term. Can you explain why you use that term to describe why they have been not doing so great? So they're 4-7 in their last 11 games. They're 5th in defense in that span. It's all about the offense. In their 7 losses, they're 21st in offense. It's been brutally bad in the losses. They have a actually that 21st in offense numbers through the entire 11 games. I need to fix that in my notes. So they're 4-7 in their last 11 games, 5th in defense, 21st in offense. In the 7 losses, they have an offensive rating at 108, which is really, really bad. It's been especially bad in the clutch situations. It's been kind of an ironic shift because the Spurs actually started the season winning 8 of their first 11 games that went to clutch situations. But they're 1-6 in clutch situations during this 4-7 stretch. In those 7 clutch games, they have an 83 offensive rating, which is just in the gutter. And it's a combination of a lot of things. I've talked a lot about settling for tough shots with Wemby. I won't get into that again today because I've harped on it like 4 times in the last couple of weeks. But some of it is decision-making. Like late in the Grizzlies game, like Steph Castle was in like kind of a one-on-one with Jaren Jackson at the rim and was clearly kind of engaged with him and tried to like go through him and shoot out to the side. It went exactly as you would expect. Jaren Jackson just swallowed the shot up. Like Victor Wembanyama had a play where he drove right into Jaren Jackson and got blocked. Like that's just poor decision making. Some of it too is just that they're shooting really, really poorly. Like Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama are 2 for 16 on clutch threes. In those 7 clutch situations, the rest of the team is only 3 for 9. So like they're not making any shots. And there's been some sloppy defense in there too, like some really bad backside rotations. Victor Wembanyama was getting pretty pissed off at the end of the Grizzlies game where there was a couple of plays where they got burned. There was a play where like Santi Aldama was being guarded by Wemby, and Santi set like a ghost screen for Desmond Bane and went out to the left corner. And Keldon Johnson was on Desmond Bane and fell for the ghost screen. Falling for the ghost screen is like he opened up, like preparing to run into the screen instead of just sliding with Bane. And so when he opened up and there was no screen, Bane just went around him, which is what happens in ghost screens. Like ghost screens are really effective because it tricks people into thinking there's going to be a screen when there's not going to be a screen, which can breed a relaxation. Like maybe we're going to get switched here, or maybe I'll just be able to chase over to the top because I'll have drop coverage help. But on that possession, Aldama went to the corner. Wemby didn't want to help. So because obviously he's guarding a shooter. So Desmond Bane went right to the basket. Nobody else in his Spurs jersey helped at the rim. Wemby's looking around like, what the hell are you guys doing? And then there was another play a couple plays later where he showed up at the level against Bane. And obviously when you show up at the level, the roll man's going to get open on the backside. And Desmond Bane threw the pass. Wemby tried to deflect it, but it got through. Well, there's a scheme for that, right? If the big shows at the level, that's where the low man steps over to rotate. The Spurs had no low man step over on that play and gave up another dunk. And so like Wemby was pissed off, but like that's just sloppy defense, right? At the end of a game. CP3 can help. Harrison Barnes can help. But at the end of the day, this team is still relying on a lot of young players that will make mistakes. I don't think Steph Castle and Victor Wembanyama will be foolishly challenging rim protectors in a few years after they learn their lesson. This is like just kind of part of the process of developing as a basketball player. Yo, Jason, keep up the great videos and great content. Do you think the Spurs should make a win-now move while Victor's contract is low and he's playing at an all-NBA level? Personally, I think if you gave Victor a De'Aaron Fox right now, we are a playoff team. The guys I would keep untouchable are Vic and Castle. I've already talked about this before, but I agree with you. I think Vic obviously is untouchable. I think Devin Vassell has been impressing me in some other ways. Like I think he's got some ability to cover ground in rotation. His closeouts are sharp, and obviously he's a capable offensive player. I'm with you though. Like Steph Castle, I think is just going to be really damn good in the big picture. But like, remember when I was talking in the last question about young players and making mistakes? There's a development process that takes place, and some players are going to be faster than others. I think Steph Castle is going to develop faster. Victor Wembanyama is going to develop faster. But other young players are going to develop slower. Like Keldon Johnson's been in the league for a while now, and he's still making mistakes. And so, like, if you put yourself on the trajectory of like, let's just be patient and hope all these guys, pan out the way they're supposed to, you're going to run into issues where some of the guys are ready, but other guys are not. And then you're not good enough. And then Victor's going to be pissed and you're not going to be competitive the way that you need to be. So like, in my opinion, because of Victor's trajectory, which is like, he's already playing at a top 10 level for most of this season, probably will be a consensus top 5 player as soon as next season. With that being the case, like you got to get on his schedule. And that would involve you being more picky and choosy about which young players you're willing to wait and watch develop. De'Aaron Fox is a super interesting option for this team. It's one that I think is a shoe-in natural fit with Victor Wembanyama on both ends of the floor. De'Aaron Fox, because of his offensive load, like his workload, he is a guy that gets kind of physically aggressive at the point of attack, like at the ball, like tries to swipe at the ball and force turnovers, but he's not the best like contain guard in the league because that just takes a lot of work, and he's got a lot of work on the other end of the floor. Well, if you're going to partner a guy like that and a forward aggressive defender, like a gambling, aggressive, try to force turnovers type of defender, you want rim protection behind him. Victor Wembanyama can support him in a way that Domantas Sabonis cannot. And it's just a guard, a real perimeter shot creator that is ready to be at Vic's level in big spots that can like actually hang instead of relying on a very old Chris Paul to be the guy that's setting him up in those situations. So like, if you can do it at the deadline this year, great. If it's something that you do over the summer, great. Whatever it is you need to do. But I would love to pair De'Aaron Fox with Victor Wembanyama. I think it's the kind of move that is aggressive while also like cognizant of a more extended timeline, because I think De'Aaron Fox has a lot of good basketball left. Hey, Jason, love the show. With Russell Westbrook's resurgence, Aaron Gordon returning from injury, and Peyton Watson looking like a better perimeter defense option at times, is it time to think about moving Christian Brown to the bench? Also, if you're Mike Malone in a playoff series, who are the 4 you want on the floor next to Jokic? We actually just talked about this, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday's show. Well, that would have been Wednesday's show because I'm recording this on Thursday. But I'm of the opinion that you need to keep Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup because you need to maintain this set of circumstances to see if you can ride this wave of really good Russell Westbrook basketball as long as you can. Aaron Gordon, I think you have to have out on the floor in terms of low man help for Jokic so that he can get up to the level of ball screens. So I think those guys have to be out there in the short term. If Russ starts to struggle, then by all means, bump him out of the starting lineup, put Christian Brown back in there. But I absolutely would bench Christian Brown at this point and keep Westbrook in the starting lineup. Hey, Jason. Not so much a basketball question, but more of a podcasting one. When you make appearances on other shows, for example, KOC's pod a while back, can you walk us through the behind the scenes about how you organize these guest appearances? Is it a conversation between Colin and whoever the boss is of Yahoo Sports, or is it a lot more informal? Here in Australia, I'm friends with someone that runs one of the biggest podcasts of Aussie Rules Footy, and because there aren't a whole lot of podcasts compared to NBA and NFL, everyone sort of knows everyone else, and it's really easy to schedule appearances on other shows. Just curious how things work in the US and the fact that the NBA is a lot bigger than the AFL, so there's way more podcast/shows for consumers. Thanks. Fun fact, one of my former high school teammates, guy who played at the University of Arizona, one of the groomsmen in my wedding, a guy named Matt Korchek, he actually played in the AFL for Carleton. There was this, I don't know if they're still doing it, but apparently the AFL comes and recruits like D1 big men that don't play in the NBA because they're just the kinds of guys that can fill the ruckman position, where I guess is like a jump ball that they throw in the middle of the field, where you basically just have the two biggest guys on either team just like fight like hell to try to get the ball. So that was interesting. But so I have just a rough understanding of the AFL from my buddy Matt's journey over there. But anyway, as far as the guest appearances, it's a lot simpler than you'd think. First of all, the volume doesn't care if I do guest appearances with anybody. I don't have to clear that with anybody. As long as I do my job and like produce my show the way that it's supposed to and put in the certain amount of effort for guest appearances with other volume shows, like they'll let me do whatever I want outside of that. I pretty much say yes to everybody who asks, and it usually just results in like a text message, like KOC will text me, or Colin's producer will text me, or whoever it is that wants to have me on the show. And yeah, there's like a common courtesy, and I provide this in reverse when I have guests on my show, but there's a common courtesy to send them a rundown, like, hey, here's what I want to talk about. But it's really simple. It's like, well, what works for your schedule this time? Okay, great. Well, what do you want to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about this. Okay, cool. Like it's really not as complicated as you think. And then it works just like any other guest appearance, where it just becomes more conversational, which I enjoy as a mix up from what I do on this show. Longtime listener, thanks for all the work you put in for us. 2-part question. 1, do you think it's worth it for the Pistons to make a deadline move this year, ideally for Cam Johnson, or do you think they ride out the year and build through the draft and free agency? I've been coaching a freshman high school team. We are routinely less talented and athletic than the majority of teams on our schedule. Are there certain offensive philosophies or sets you would suggest implementing to get the most out of my roster? Sorry for the lengthy comment. Thanks again. Keep up the great work. For number 1, as far as the Pistons go, like here's the thing. You call up Detroit, and if you can do something like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Simone Fontecchio and get Cam Johnson, or maybe you can get it with just Tim Hardaway Jr. But if you do some sort of deal like that, and you don't have to include a ton of draft compensation, sure, by all means. I just think it's going to be more of a bidding war. And what I would not do is give 2 first-round picks for Cam Johnson, because that first-round draft compensation you need to save just in case you need to make a more aggressive trade down the line for a more elite talent. Especially for an off-ball scorer like Cam Johnson, there's a lot of opportunity, in my opinion, in the middle of the first round to find wings that can shoot and defend a little bit. And so I'd rather build that sort of talent side out through the draft because it's discounted and it keeps you on a timeline that doesn't disrupt your ability to adjust the team and the roster moving forward. But again, like if you can get Cam Johnson for Tim Hardaway Jr. and not include a ton, by all means, like just do it. But I just wouldn't be super aggressive in terms of draft compensation. As far as your high school team goes, in terms of like sets, it's just really difficult because I don't know what players are on your team. And the reality is like there are certain like structures that work best for certain teams and not for others, right? Like if you have a supreme ball handler, but you don't have a lot of surrounding talent, you need to generate space for him to work. But if you have like a conglomeration of talent, then you need to play with more 5-out concepts, more 3-man action, more motion side to side, stuff that's going to get everybody the ball, where your decision making and your aggregate skill can kind of take over, right? But like, I don't want to get into sets for any more than that, just because I don't know about your team. As far as like competing with more athletic and more talented teams, the best thing you can do is win the margins. If you're in better shape and your guys sprint the floor in offensive transition and defensive transition every time, if in defensive transition, they stop the ball, protect the rim, spray out to shooters. If in offensive transition, they run their lanes, meaning you have your best athlete forward or center run to the rim, your best shooting forward trail the play, and you have your wings run to the corners, and you run early offense, and you on defense, if you have a good shell drill where you're loading up on the strong side, and you have good principles like that also is contingent on the roster. Like if you have a center, you don't want to be switching a lot, but most high school teams don't have a center, so they do a lot more switching. Like I coach high school, and there's almost every team is doing a ton of switching among the teams that we compete with. So like, again, like the more schematic stuff on either end of the floor is just really difficult for me to get into because I don't know your roster, but just win the margins. Like make sure your team competes on the glass. Make sure your team like is good at setting their man up for screens, and make sure your screeners are really good at setting good fundamentally sound screens. Make sure that guys are running and sprinting into their cuts. If you're running ball screens, don't let your big jog up into the screen. Make sure he sprints up into the screen. All of those little things will go a long way towards decreasing the gap in the talent and athleticism between you and your opponents. How do you think Klay has fit in Dallas so far? He's averaging the least amount of points since his rookie season, and his three-point percentage is near the lowest of his career as well. But the Mavericks are winning and look strong when healthy. And the defense has held up as well, even when Luka, Kyrie, and Klay all play together. What's working in Dallas that didn't work in Golden State? Thanks. Love the show. I think he's mostly been really good. I was looking at the numbers today. He's still at 1.2 points per catch and shoot this season, 1.26 when he's unguarded, 1.16 when he's guarded. Those are both excellent numbers. His number of unguarded attempts is down. I think that has mostly to do with the injuries, though. Like in Golden State, he got 3.6 unguarded catch and shoots per game. He's getting 2.6 with Dallas. Again, that's to be expected when Kyrie and Luka have missed as much time as they have. The trio of guys have actually played 784 possessions, which is not a big sample size, but it's not a tiny sample size either. They have a 120 offensive rating with that group, which is really good. And they have a 113 defensive rating with that group, which is above average. It's not anything to write home about, but it's above average. I still think they could use a lot in the way of reps, and Luka wasn't close to healthy in the time they played, so I think that could look better down the line. I still just really like the roster. I've talked about this a lot, but I think Dallas is the best roster in the West behind Oklahoma City. And what I like about the Klay thing is it's about options. Like, there will be situations where Klay makes the most sense. There will be situations where they need more ball handling, and Spencer Dinwiddie makes more sense. There will be situations where they need better defense on the perimeter, but also need spot-up shooting. They'll go with someone like Quentin Grimes, right? Like, there will be situations where between Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall is playing better. Najee probably gives you the best combination of defense, ball handling, and spot-up shooting. But again, a lot of it you can feel out from night to night. Like, this guy is feeling it tonight. Let's go with him. Klay's body is feeling great, and he's sliding his feet, and he's guarding tonight. Okay, we're leaning on Klay. That sort of flexibility to me is what makes this Dallas roster so exciting. Is like they just have depth at every position group. Okay, you need a primary shot creator. Well, guess what? Kyrie and Luka are two of the very best in the NBA. Okay, well, one of them's down. We need somebody to step into that spot. Well, we have Spencer Dinwiddie who can really create shots in that system. Jaden Hardy, Najee Marshall can put the ball on the floor. Klay Thompson can run action. Like, there's just a lot of depth there. Off-ball shooting, there's just a ton of off-ball shooting. Forward depth, you have PJ Washington, you have Maxi Kleba. The center position, you have two just literally rock-solid starting caliber NBA centers. Like, that team is just loaded with talent. And I know that they've been losing a lot of games since Kyrie and Luka got out. And I know that they may not be in the situation in the standings that you would have thought this year. But, I mean, this is one of those teams where, like, very rarely in NBA history is there a team where I'm like, if they get healthy and they get right before the end of the season, they can really make a run. And Dallas is one of those teams for me. 4 more. What do you think is the biggest reason for Westbrook's success with the Nuggets? Would you accredit it to Jokic's amazing passing ability, or do you think it's more Westbrook's doing? I've noticed Westbrook has been very good at cutting off the ball and seems to be hitting more catch and shoot threes. Absolutely love the show. I watch almost every episode. Never stop doing this. Thank you. That's very kind of you. I did a deep dive breakdown of this the other day, so I don't want to get too far into it. You can actually find it on our YouTube channel. It's like Westbrook's return. It's a big thumbnail with Russell Westbrook on it. But I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. I've seen a lot of Nuggets fans that are like kind of victory lapping over like we fixed Russ, no one else could. And like, I think that's disrespectful to the multiple fan bases that watched and rooted for Russ. He's on his 6th team in 7 years, guys. Like, it can't all be the Lakers' fault if he's on his 6th team in 7 years. Here's the thing. There's blame to go all the way around in all of these situations. Russ is not the only reason why the Lakers sucked in that 2022 season and missed the playoffs. He's not the only reason why things were bad in that period, which, by the way, they traded Russ and went to the Western Conference Finals. Like, it was clearly a bad fit. They brought in better fitting talent and they went on a run. But like during that time, like, other people were to blame as well. It wasn't just Russ's fault. That said, like, it was also Russ's fault. Like, Russ was not hitting catch and shoot threes. He was not cutting. I shared the numbers, but like, he's already had almost 3 times as many buckets off of cuts this season, just in this small half of a season, than he did his last year in Los Angeles. So, with the Lakers, I mean. So like, it's a combination of factors. Jokic definitely makes it easier. He's the best player in the world. And as good as LeBron and AD are, neither of them were the best player in the world in 2022 or 2023, right? The Nuggets in general, I think, are a better, more organized basketball team than the Lakers. That definitely helps. But a big chunk of it is Russ is starting to hit threes when he didn't. And Russ is being willing to move off the ball and to cut and to be a threat without just standing around on the perimeter. It's Russ, through the humiliation of the last few years, has become an active participant in his own survival in this league. He's put in the work. And so it's a combination of all those factors. I think Nuggets fans should feel a certain amount of pride in the way that they've been able to weaponize Russell Westbrook. But making it so that everyone else was terrible and Russ was never to blame, and here we are finally giving Russ his opportunity, that's just not reality. And guys, I watched every single game he played with the Lakers. I promise you, he was to blame too for how things went during that span. Do you think the concept of a tough shot maker is real? And if so, how valuable is it to a team? I find it hard to understand how a tough shot maker or clutch player averaging 21 points per game will be seen as a more valuable piece on a team compared to someone else who averages the same amount of points doing it with less tough shots. Tough shot making is a skill in basketball just like anything else is. But if it's your foundational skill, I don't think it's a good foundational skill. I'll use myself as an example here for a minute. Like, one of my best traits as a basketball player is I'm a tough shot maker. And I've had that since I was young. I'm a good athlete and I'm tall. I have long arms, and I've worked really hard behind the scenes on like right shoulder fadeaways, left shoulder fadeaways, one leg fadeaways, step backs going right, step backs going left, all this different footwork. And those shots were useful for me when I was younger, but when I was younger and I could make tough shots, but I couldn't do much else, I wasn't a good basketball player. Not nearly as good as I am when I'm older now. Tough shot making still helps me to this day. If there's spots where like I need to get a bucket in my men's league or in a pickup game, like I like having the ability to create my own shot. That's something that is a useful skill. But what made me a better basketball player in this later phase of my time playing is all of the other stuff, like defending, rebounding, playing within a team concept as an offensive player. So like when it comes to tough shot making, like having a tough shot making a shot maker on your NBA team is super useful. But like if your entire offense is predicated on guys hitting tough contested pull-up jump shots, it just puts a certain ceiling on your team offensively, especially when things get grinded down to halt in playoff games. This has been something I've seen with some of the best pull-up shooters in the league in recent years. I've seen this happen to James Harden. I saw it happen to Kevin Durant in 2022, if you remember, when he lost to Boston. There's a lot of examples of this where like it gets so physical that you're so tired that it's hard to make the tough shots. Tough shots are like 50% footwork, and then, or I should say 33% footwork, 33% touch, but 33% is leg strength. Like if I'm looking at a good defender and I go in and out, cross between the legs, and I cover ground on a side step to the right and rise up and shoot. I have to, on that side step, cover enough ground to get separation while also having the leg strength to stop my sideways momentum and get straight up and down and get the lift I need to shoot over a contest and get the ball to the rim. It's hard to do in a knockdown, drag out fist fight of a playoff series. And so I've even seen this with me, like where like when I'm playing in like tough money tournaments and it's like the money's on the line and I'm playing my 5th game in the same day, like I can't be leaning on my right shoulder fade or my left shoulder fade in that situation. I'm just not going to get enough lift to knock it down in those sorts of situations. That's where I've got to use more of my size and strength to get closer to the basket and try to win bully ball battles. I had a money tournament just a couple months ago in the fall where we played 6 games in the same day because we ended up dropping the first game to the team from Phoenix that came down, and we had to go down and beat the losers bracket and then go back up and beat the team from Phoenix. And like I didn't do much work in the post all day. I'd been doing a lot more shooting from the perimeter, operating as a ball handler, that kind of stuff. And in that final game, I was like, I'm dead. I need to just use my size. And I just went down to the block and worked out of the post during the championship game. And it's just more reliable in those sorts of situations. And that's kind of what I've always been drawn to Jokic about, as in more in the NBA concept. And by the way, when I talk about myself as a player, most of you guys take it the right way, but like, it's just how I relate to the game. I don't have delusions of grandeur. I'm not here sitting here thinking I should be in the NBA. As a matter of fact, I think I'm far from that level. But I've worked really hard to become a good basketball player, and it's how I relate to these situations. It's how I think about the game. And like Jokic, for instance, one of the things that's always drawn me to him as a player is like he thrives in those situations because his game is predicated on close to the basket shot making, which doesn't rely as much on his leg strength and is less susceptible to fatigue related decline, if that makes sense. All right, 2 more quick ones. Hi, Jason. I had a question about the comments here. I feel like there's always a loud minority that just wants to hate on the show. I was wondering how you manage to deal with comments like that so professionally and not let it get to you. When I tried making stuff on YouTube, I had a similar situation on a much smaller scale, and the hate comments really got under my skin. Thanks for your content. You enrich my experience with basketball. Thank you for the kind words. It's not easy. Like I was talking about this with my wife actually the other night. It's really bizarre actually to have a lot of people talking shit about you on the internet every day. I really struggled with it a lot in the first like year or 2. I've gotten a lot better at it, more just compartmentalizing. The reality is though, is it never goes like the icky feeling you get when you read someone who says something bad about you doesn't go away. Like every time I read a comment like that, it still feels funky, right? I've just gotten better at quickly compartmentalizing it and moving on. But it's just an important part of the space. And something I would say with this sort of thing is like, anytime you do anything that has you in the public sphere. And some of this is like the reality. I've seen some like professional athletes complaining about this, and I want to be like, you're a professional athlete. You're in the public sphere. This is what comes with the space. But like, everybody that exists in this space, whether it's media, whether it's just being a public figure, whether it's being an influencer, whether it's being a professional athlete that has big social media profiles, whatever it is, the internet is just going to bring a certain amount of nastiness to you. And you just got to find a way to deal with it as best as you can. I think part of it is the self-awareness to just know that it's never going to stop. Like, it will, no matter what I do, even if I tried so hard, even if I identified every single thing that people are upset about and I tried to cater my analysis to fit into this like perfect zone, there would still be hundreds of people who would be pissed off at me. So like part of it is understanding that no matter what you do, you're going to piss people off and there's going to be negativity. And once you accept that reality, it becomes about navigating it within your own mental health as best as you can. And I know that certain people deal with it in different ways than others. So what works for me may not work for you. I'll tell you guys, to be honest with you, the big one that works for me is zooming out and looking at the big picture, which is that when I have a video that, or like if we have a week where we get 250,000 views or 300,000 views, and there's, 300 or 400 really nasty comments, there's usually like way more very positive comments, like really positive comments. And there's the viewership. You can't deny the viewership. What is 200 assholes in the mix of 250,000 views, right? And so like zooming out and like looking at the big picture helps me compartmentalize it a little bit. But yeah, like I'd be lying to you if I said I don't just look at it and just feel great and rolls off the back. It sucks, and you just get better at handling it as you get older. Jason, you are the man. I've been reading some of these comments, and I was wondering, as a reporter, what do you think about comments from people that give you directives on how you should report on things when they don't study or know nearly as much as you? I think part of the issue is not having ego within this space, which is like, I work really hard behind the scenes. I watch a ton of film, and I try to learn as much about the NBA as I can. I'm on this like side mission that runs hand in hand with this job, which is I want to run the best show that I can, but I also want to learn as much about NBA basketball as I possibly can. I want to be an expert on NBA basketball. And so I have a certain confidence in my analysis based out of the work that I do behind the scenes. But I also think it's important to not feel like you've got it all figured out. And so that's the thing, is like when people disagree with me, I look at it as just additional perspective, another opportunity to learn about the game from somebody who views it differently. And so within that context, like when I see people that comment stuff and they argue or say, you're wrong, that's stupid, I think it's this, like there are times, of course there are times where I look at it and I go, yeah, I disagree with that. But there are other times where I see, that's why I read the comments. I read the comments because I want your guys' perspective. And there are times where like I listen to or read a comment and someone will have like hey, actually, with the Pacers, I've noticed this, and I'll be like, oh, that's super interesting. And then like, I'll do my own digging into it and come to another conclusion. And like, I was actually talking about this with a couple of Celtics guys the other day. I think that everybody that has the intention of being an expert in anything should try to listen to as many people as possible to gain as many perspectives as you can, and to just increase the total amount that you can learn from something like this. But again, like I don't take it personally when people disagree with me about basketball takes. I just look at it as an opportunity to get additional perspective. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. Tomorrow, I've got the special I recorded with Jovan yesterday that's going to be running just kind of a Lakers deadline-centric piece. And then we'll be back on Monday with our power rankings and everything like usual. I'll see you guys then.